The unexpected encounter. The wind howled through the quantum research station, its metallic walls creaking against the relentless forest wilderness. Dr. Zara Nakamura stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the holographic display flickering with cascading quantum algorithms. Outside, the ancient trees swayed like sentinels, their branches casting intricate shadows across the reinforced windows. Zara was different from most quantum engineers. Where others saw complex mathematical equations, she perceived living patterns, intricate threads of possibility that danced and intertwined. Her latest project was revolutionary, a quantum weave technology that could potentially manipulate the very fabric of reality. A sudden crash interrupted her concentration. Something had breached the station's perimeter. The security systems remained eerily silent, which was far more concerning than any blaring alarm. Zara's hand instinctively reached for the emergency communication device, her fingers hovering just above its surface. The main entrance corridor slowly creaked open. A figure stumbled through, leaving a trail of silvery, almost luminescent fluid. He was tall, with features that seemed to shift and blur at the edges, as if he wasn't entirely solid. His clothing was unlike anything Zara had ever seen, a complex weave of materials that seemed to respond to his body's movement, changing color and texture with each labored breath. "Help," he whispered, his voice a combination of a sound and a feeling that resonated deep within Zara's core. Before she could respond, he collapsed. Zara rushed forward, her scientific training battling with an inexplicable sense of connection. As she approached, she noticed something extraordinary. The wounds on his body were unlike any she had encountered. They weren't bleeding in a conventional sense. Instead, they seemed to be shifting, almost healing and reopening in a complex rhythm. Her quantum sensors, typically calibrated to detect minute energy variations, went wild. The stranger's body was emitting energy patterns that defied every known scientific principle. Each pulse seemed to carry a message, a story far beyond human comprehension. Carefully, she knelt beside him. Her hands, typically steady during the most complex quantum experiments, trembled slightly. Something about this moment felt like more than a mere scientific encounter. It felt like a convergence, as if multiple realities were intersecting at this exact point. The wounded traveler's eyes flickered open. They were not the typical human eyes. Instead, they appeared like swirling galaxies, with colors that seemed to exist beyond the visible spectrum. For a brief moment, Zara felt she was looking into an entire universe. "You can see," he muttered, his words carrying a weight that transcended language. Zara's quantum weave technology suddenly hummed to life, seemingly responding to the stranger's presence. The holographic displays around her began to shift, showing complex patterns that looked like a combination of mathematical equations and living, breathing organisms. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a mixture of scientific curiosity and something deeper, a sense of recognition she couldn't explain. The stranger's response was interrupted by another wave of what appeared to be pain. But it wasn't just physical pain. It was as if he was experiencing multiple realities simultaneously, each one causing a different type of suffering. Zara knew she had a choice. She could approach this as a pure scientific observation, or she could trust the inexplicable connection she felt. The quantum weave technology beside her seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if it too was waiting for her decision. Little did she know, this moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she understood about science, reality, and her own place in the universe. The forest outside continued to sway, its ancient trees. Secrets of the quantum weave. Hours had passed since the mysterious traveler's arrival. Zara's research station, typically a bastion of clinical precision, now felt like a living, breathing entity of its own. The quantum weave technology surrounding the stranger pulsed with an almost sentient energy, its holographic tendrils casting ethereal light across the sterile medical bay. Kai, the name he had finally revealed, remained in a state between consciousness and something entirely otherworldly. His body continued to emit those impossible energy signatures that defied every scientific principle Zara had ever known. Each time she attempted to run a diagnostic, the equipment would flicker, recalibrate, and produce results that seemed more like abstract art than scientific data. "Who are you really?" Zara muttered, reviewing the latest scan results. The images showed layers of reality overlapping within Kai's cellular structure, as if he existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her research into quantum entanglement had always been theoretical. She'd spent years developing the quantum weave technology, a breakthrough that could potentially manipulate the fundamental threads of reality. But Kai was living proof that her most radical theories barely scratched the surface of what was possible. A sudden movement caught her attention. Kai's hand twitched, and for a moment the entire research station seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was breathing. "The convergence," Kai whispered, his galaxy-like eyes flickering open. "It's closer than you understand." Zara leaned forward, her scientific skepticism battling with an inexplicable sense of connection. "What convergence? What are you talking about?" Kai's body began to stabilize, the strange, luminescent fluid that had marked his wounds slowly receding. His skin, if it could be called that, seemed to be made of something between matter and pure energy. "Your quantum weave," he said, his voice resonating with multiple tones. "It's more than just a technological breakthrough. It's a key, a bridge between realities that have been separated for millennia." Zara's mind raced. Her life's work had always been about pushing the boundaries of quantum mechanics, but she had never imagined it could be anything more than a scientific pursuit. The quantum weave was supposed to be a method of manipulating quantum states, of creating unprecedented computational possibilities. "I don't understand," she admitted, her fingers unconsciously tracing the holographic interface of her primary research terminal. Kai struggled to sit up, and the room around them seemed to adjust, walls shifting subtly, equipment realigning as if responding to his presence. "The boundaries between what you consider separate realities are thinner than a quantum particle. Your technology doesn't just observe these boundaries, it can potentially dissolve them." A memory surfaced in Zara's mind. Years ago, during her doctoral research, she had encountered an anomaly, a quantum event so bizarre that her colleagues had dismissed it as a computational error. She had seen, just for a fraction of a second, multiple versions of the same experiment occurring simultaneously. "The research station," Kai continued, "was not a coincidence. It was positioned here deliberately. This location is a quantum nexus, a point where multiple realities converge most strongly." Outside, the ancient forest seemed to lean closer, its trees casting shadows that looked almost like intricate circuit boards. Zara's quantum weave technology began to pulse more intensely. The holographic displays transformed, showing complex patterns that looked like living mathematical equations, a language that existed beyond human comprehension. "A threat is coming," Kai said, his tone a mixture of warning and something deeper, a cosmic urgency. "And your quantum weave might be the only defense." The research station's ambient temperature dropped several degrees. Something was approaching, something that existed beyond the realm of normal perception. Zara realized she was no longer just a quantum engineer. She had become something else entirely, a potential guardian at the intersection of realities. And their journey was just beginning. The gathering storm. The research station's protective shields flickered like a dying heartbeat. Zara watched in a mixture of terror and scientific fascination as the world outside began to unravel. Reality itself seemed to be fraying at the edges, with impossible geometries bleeding through the fabric of normal perception. Kai stood beside her now, no longer the wounded traveler but a being of incredible complexity. His form continued to shift, sometimes translucent, sometimes solid, a living embodiment of the quantum principles Zara had studied her entire life. "They are coming," Kai said, his voice a chorus of whispers that seemed to originate from multiple points simultaneously. "The disruptors." The research station's advanced quantum communication systems began to malfunction. Holographic displays erupted with chaotic patterns, mathematical equations that twisted and writhed like living entities. Zara's carefully constructed quantum weave technology responded to the approaching threat, its intricate network of energy threads beginning to pulse with a defensive rhythm. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Zara's longtime colleague and the station's chief of security, burst into the central research chamber. Her tactical uniform was scorched, and a deep gash ran along her left arm. "We've lost the outer perimeter," she reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Something is cutting through our dimensional barriers." Kai's eyes, those swirling galaxies of impossible colors, narrowed. The disruptors feed on dimensional instability. They are not a singular entity but a collective consciousness that seeks to consume realities. Zara's mind raced. Her quantum weave technology had always been theoretical, a way to manipulate quantum states to create computational models that could predict multiple potential outcomes. But now it was becoming something more: a weapon, a shield, a bridge between realities. "We need to understand their method of attack," Zara said, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Lines of quantum code materialized around her, forming complex defensive patterns. "Elena, gather all the sensor data from the last hour. We need to analyze their dimensional penetration vectors." The station's walls began to ripple. For a moment, Zara could see multiple versions of the research facility overlapping, one intact, one burning, one completely destroyed. The quantum weave technology was revealing the multiplicity of potential realities. Kai placed a hand on the central quantum core, a device that looked more like a living crystal than a piece of technology. "The weave must be prepared," he said, "not just as a defensive mechanism, but as a conduit." Outside, the forest that had always seemed ancient and peaceful now looked like a battlefield. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, their branches becoming conduits of strange energy. The sky fractured, revealing glimpses of other worlds, realities that should have remained separate. Elena brought up the sensor readings. The data was unlike anything they had ever seen. The disruptors didn't attack in a conventional sense. They unraveled reality itself, consuming dimensional energy like a cosmic predator consuming prey. "They're not just invading," Zara realized, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and growing terror. "They're rewriting the fundamental rules of existence." Kai's form began to stabilize, taking on a more defined shape. "Your quantum weave is more than a technology," he explained. "It's a living algorithm, a potential immune system for reality itself." The station's quantum core began to resonate. Waves of potential energy spread outward, creating a defensive network that looked like intricate, living mathematics. Zara understood now why she had been drawn to this location, why her research had followed such a specific path. They were not just preparing for a battle. They were becoming the first line of defense for reality itself. As the first wave of dimensional disruption approached, Zara, Kai, and Elena stood united, scientists and protectors at the edge of everything known. The gathering storm was about to break. Quantum resonance. The first wave of disruptors arrived like a fracture in reality itself. They weren't creatures in any traditional sense, more like living algorithms, cascading patterns of destruction that consumed dimensional energy with ruthless efficiency. Zara's quantum weave technology hummed to life, transforming the research station into a living defensive network. Holographic interfaces erupted around them, creating intricate barriers that pulsed with mathematical precision. Each defensive layer was a complex equation, a living shield that adapted in milliseconds. "They're probing for weaknesses," Kai shouted over the rising quantum interference. His form flickered, part energy, part matter, fully focused on the incoming threat. "The weave must remain unbroken." Elena Rodriguez manned the primary defense console, her military training merging seamlessly with Zara's quantum calculations. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, routing quantum energy through adaptive channels that seemed to defy conventional physics. The disruptors attacked in waves of impossible geometry. Where they touched reality, space itself began to unravel. Entire sections of the forest outside the station disappeared, replaced by glimpses of alien landscapes, worlds that should never have intersected. The quantum core is our anchor, Zara called out, her voice cutting through the dimensional chaos. She understood now that her life's work was more than just a scientific pursuit. The quantum weave was a living defense mechanism, a way to protect the fundamental fabric of existence. Kai moved to the central quantum core. His touch transformed the device, causing it to pulse with an energy that was part technology, part something entirely beyond human comprehension. "We're not just defending," he explained. "We're communicating." The disruptors were more than just invaders. They were a collective consciousness, a dimensional predator that consumed realities like a cosmic ecosystem. Each attack was a form of information gathering, a way to understand and ultimately break down the barriers between worlds. Alina's sensors went wild. "They're adapting," she warned. "Each defensive pattern we create, they're learning from it." Zara realized the true nature of their conflict. This wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a complex dialogue, a negotiation between different forms of existence. The quantum weave was becoming a translation device, a way to communicate with entities that existed beyond human comprehension. "We need to change our approach," Zara said, her mind racing with possibilities. The quantum weave began to shift, no longer just a defensive mechanism but an active interface. She was transforming their technology into a dimensional translator. The station around them became a living entity. Walls rippled with mathematical patterns, floors became conduits of quantum energy. Reality itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with each defensive pulse. Kai's form became more defined, his galaxy-like eyes focused on the incoming disruptors. "They seek to understand," he said, his voice a combination of multiple harmonics. "Our defense must be more than resistance, it must be communication." A breakthrough moment approached. The quantum weave was no longer just Zara's invention. It was becoming a living bridge between realities, a way to negotiate with entities that existed beyond conventional understanding. The first true communication was about to begin. The disruptors paused, their fractal forms hovering at the edge of reality. Something had changed. The quantum weave was no longer just a barrier, it was becoming a language. And in that moment of potential understanding, everything would change. Convergence of worlds. The moment of communication was unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The disruptors, those living algorithms of dimensional destruction, began to transform. No longer were they pure predators, they became something else entirely. Zara watched in awe as the quantum weave technology acted as a universal translator, bridging gaps between consciousness that had never been bridged before. The research station became a nexus of impossible understanding, where the boundaries between invader and defender blurred into something entirely new. "They're sharing their origin," Kai said, his voice a symphony of multiple realities. His form continued to shift, becoming a living conduit of information. "The disruptors aren't a threat, they're survivors." Alina Rodriguez stood transfixed, her military training rendering her momentarily speechless. The tactical displays around her showed realities bleeding into one another, not in destruction, but in a complex dance of mutual understanding. The story of the disruptors unfolded through the quantum weave, a narrative of a dying multiverse. They weren't invaders seeking to consume. They were refugees, dimensional wanderers searching for a way to preserve the last fragments of their collapsing realities. Zara's quantum weave technology did more than translate. It began to heal, creating bridges between fractured dimensional spaces, offering a potential sanctuary for these lost entities. "We can help them," Zara realized, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that now looked more like living ecosystems than technological displays. "But it will require something unprecedented." Kai nodded, his galaxy-like eyes focusing on the quantum core. "A complete recalibration of dimensional boundaries, not destruction, not defense, but transformation." The research station began to change. Walls became permeable, shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The forest outside merged with glimpses of alien landscapes, worlds that had been separated for millennia now finding a way to coexist. Elena's sensors went beyond traditional tracking. She was now monitoring the flow of entire realities, watching as the quantum weave created pathways of mutual survival. "This is beyond any scientific protocol," she muttered, a mixture of terror and exhilaration in her voice. The disruptors, if they could still be called that, began to integrate with the quantum weave. Their fractal forms became less chaotic, more purposeful. They were learning, adapting, finding a way to exist without destroying. "There's a cost," Kai warned. His form became more translucent, suggesting the immense energy required for such a massive dimensional reconciliation. "Maintaining these bridges will require constant energy, a perpetual quantum dialogue." Zara understood. Her life's work had been leading to this moment. The quantum weave was no longer just a technology. It was a living bridge between realities, a way to preserve consciousness itself. The research station became a beacon. Waves of quantum energy radiated outward, creating corridors between worlds that had been separated since the beginning of existence. The disruptors were transforming, finding new purpose as guardians of these newly created dimensional pathways. "We're not just saving them," Zara said, her voice filled with a mixture of scientific wonder and profound compassion. "We're creating a new way of existing." Kai's form began to stabilize, becoming a bridge between the human world and the multi-dimensional entities they were helping. "Some boundaries were never meant to be permanent," he said. "Some walls exist only because no one has yet imagined a way around them." As the first true convergence began, reality itself seemed to take a deep breath, a moment of profound transformation that would change everything forever. The quantum weave pulsed, the worlds listened,